When I stepped into the courtroom, Dad looked relaxed, Mom straightened her pearls, and my brother smirked. They thought I had nothing until the safe was unlocked. Can you imagine walking into a courthouse, every single step echoing like a thunderclap in the silence, knowing your own family is there, not just to watch, but to silently crucify you? That day, walking those longest 50 feet, I could feel their eyes drilling into my back, their whispers like venom. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on trial. They were. I didn't even flinch when I heard my mother's laugh, that soft, cutting sound she'd perfected over decades, always perfectly timed for maximum humiliation. It was her elegant knife, the one she'd wielded my entire life. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my father, shaking his head, a wave of familiar disappointment radiating from him. For 32 years, that had been my identity, Beatrice Langford, the daughter who could never quite measure up. But not today. Today, that narrative died. I took my seat next to Sandra Miller, the federal prosecutor, smoothing down my navy blazer with hands I refused to let tremble. Sandra gave me a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement, professional to professional. The sheer weight of what we'd uncovered pressed down on us. "You ready?" she whispered. Was I ready to dismantle the empire my own family had built? Absolutely. You see, the Langford name means something in Portland. It's etched into the skyline. A dozen rental developments, 3 stunning lakefront properties, over $8 million in real estate. My father, Graham Langford, built that empire, brick by brick, over 40 long years. He was the man whose approval I'd chased my entire life, like a shadow that always stayed just out of reach. And then there was my mother, Diane Langford. On the surface, Portland's beloved socialite, queen of charity galas, a picture of grace and philanthropy. But underneath? A cold, calculating precision. She sat behind me, legs crossed at the ankle, pearls gleaming under the harsh lights. Perfect posture. Perfect smile. Perfectly cruel. And my brother, Ethan, 2 rows back, utterly oblivious. 35 years old and still the golden sun, scrolling through his phone as if this was all just a minor inconvenience. He didn't even glance up when I walked in. His dismissal of me was as complete now as it had been when we were kids. My mind flashed back to 2016. The housing market crashed, nearly taking our empire with it. I can still see my father's face, gray with stress as the numbers bled red, month after month. His health failed. I stepped in. 18-hour days became my norm, just to keep Langford Holdings from total collapse. I poured everything into it. $520,000 of my personal savings, money I'd meticulously set aside for my own future. Gone. Just like that, into the family business, like water on dying plants. No contracts. No guarantees. Just a blind, foolish faith in my family and the name we all carried. 3 months later, the market corrected. Profits soared again. And there I was, sitting at our opulent mahogany dining table, watching my mother cut her steak with surgical precision, so delicate, so refined. "The board has concerns," my father mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "About certain financial manipulations." My fork froze midair. Financial manipulations? I stared at him. "You mean the money that saved the company?" My mother, ever so poised, dabbed her lips with a napkin. "The manner in which it was done, Beatrice. It shows a certain overreach." I looked between them, waiting for the punchline, for the "just kidding" that never came. "I'm being dismissed?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "After everything I've done?" My mother laid down her knife. Her eyes were colder than any winter glass. "You were born to follow, not to lead, Beatrice. Some of us simply must accept our place." Those words. They didn't just hurt, they carved into me, deeper than any blade ever could. I left that night with nothing but a folder of balance sheets, the only proof I had of my contribution and of my complete, brutal dismissal. The silence as I walked out the door? Deafening. My entire identity, stripped away with a few, carefully chosen words. Now, here in the courthouse, meeting Sandra's gaze, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: respect. And it felt good. "Yes," I told her, my voice steady. even though there was an earthquake rumbling in my chest. "I'm ready." The courtroom hushed as Judge Alan McKinney entered. His face was a mask, his eyes neutral as he called the court to order. I wondered if he could feel the sheer weight of what was about to happen, decades of manipulation, laid bare for the world to see. I could feel my father's eyes burning into my back, that familiar weight of disappointment. It used to crush me. I remembered his slow, dismissive blink whenever I dared to question anything. My mother, I saw her adjust subtly, straightening her already perfect posture, tilting her chin just so, the perfect picture of maternal concern. But I knew it masked the architect of 1,000 small, undermining comments, each one designed to keep me firmly in my place. And Ethan? He finally looked up from his phone, a smug grin radiating from him like heat. I could almost see him at the family table, lounging, always lounging, while the rest of us sat rigidly, secure in his golden child status. It was all so clear now. The control, the manipulation, the steady, insidious erosion of my confidence. For years, I truly believed it was love. I thought I was the problem. How utterly wrong I'd been. As the judge began to speak, a strange, powerful calm settled over me. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about properties or companies or even some inheritance. It was about truth. And for the very first time in my life, the truth was on my side. I straightened my spine. I faced forward. I was ready for the reckoning, years in the making. After I walked out of that mansion, 3 years earlier, I built a life that was finally mine. My Portland loft sat 5 stories up, industrial windows framing Mount Hood on clear days. Simple, clean lines. Nothing like the ornate excess I'd grown up with. It was a place where I made the rules. Until one day, a plain gray parcel showed up at my door. No sender. No stamp. Just my name, in block letters that made my stomach clench. I carried it inside, placed it on my kitchen counter like it might detonate. For 20 agonizing minutes, I circled that package, making coffee I wouldn't drink, straightening things that weren't even crooked. Finally, I tore it open. A sealed envelope slid out. For her eyes only. H. Langford. My grandfather's handwriting. Henry had been gone 6 years, but I'd recognize those blocky capital letters anywhere. They belonged to a different era, when a man's word mattered. My hands actually trembled as I broke the seal. Inside? A will. Handwritten, dated 2004, with Henry's unmistakable signature at the bottom. I, Henry Langford, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath all properties, holdings, and assets to my granddaughter, Beatrice Langford. I sank onto my couch, the paper shaking in my grip. This couldn't be real. I remembered grandfather's funeral. 3 weeks later, the court read his will. I was there, watching Ethan's smirk widen as every single asset went to him. Not a penny for me. Not even a memento. Now I pulled up the probate records on my laptop, comparing them side by side. The court version named Ethan. Exclusively. But this version, Henry's true version, left everything to me. The signatures didn't match. Close, but not identical. One had been forged. Back then, Oregon's digital will registry didn't exist. A perfect legal blind spot. Easily exploited. By someone who knew the system. Someone like my father. 3 days later, my phone rang. It jolted me awake from a fitful sleep filled with courtrooms and chilling forgeries. Is this Beatrice Langford? A man's voice, gravelly with age. Who's asking? I replied, my heart pounding. Caleb Warner. I worked for your grandfather's attorney. He paused. The one who vanished in 2009. My chest tightened. What do you know about that? He just laid it out. He refused to alter Henry's will. That's why he disappeared. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. I've been afraid to come forward. But I can't live with it anymore. We met at a small cafe by the Willamette River. I got there early, picked a corner table where I could see both entrances. Caleb Warner was older than I expected, mid-70s, thin white hair, pale blue eyes magnified by thick glasses. He limped slightly, scanning the room like a spy before he approached. You look like Henry, he said, sliding into the chair. Same eyes. Then, without any preamble, he pushed a scratched flash drive across the table. Your grandfather's attorney. He recorded everything. Insurance, he called it. That night, alone in my apartment, I plugged it in. A trembling voice filled my speakers. They forced me to forge the will. Graham and Diane Langford. They had copies of Henry's signatures, pulled one from a property deed from 1998. Graham said if I didn't cooperate, I'd regret it. I'm leaving town tonight if anything happens to me. The recording cut off. I played it 3 more times. Each repetition hardened something inside me. The deed from 1998. I remembered it, a Lake Oswego property. The forged signature matched it. Perfectly. My father had orchestrated everything. The mastermind. He ordered the forgery. He handled the attorney when he became a liability. My mother? She used her social connections to silence any questions. Their coordinated effort. Not just to erase my inheritance, but to erase me. And Ethan? The willing beneficiary. Complicit through his absolute silence. The very next morning, I rented a safety deposit box at First Oregon Bank. The original will went in there, safe, along with Caleb's notarized statement. I made digital copies. Encrypted cloud accounts. Separate drives. Trusted friends. I became obsessed. Nights were spent researching Oregon estate law, statutes of limitations, forensic document examination. I was building my case, brick by meticulous brick. I'll testify, Caleb told me a week later over coffee. My reputation be damned. I reached across the table, squeezing his weathered hand. This isn't just forgery, Caleb, I told him. It's time theft. They stole years I could have spent building on Henry's legacy. The trail eventually led me to Bend, to a nursing home. Althea Monroe, 82 now, lived in a tiny room filled with photographs. Henry's former housekeeper. She answered the door in a floral housecoat, white hair pulled into a neat bun. I wondered when you'd come, she said, and ushered me inside. Her trembling hands turned the pages of a worn photo album. I was there when he signed it, she whispered, pointing. Right in his study. Your mother was standing right behind him. She stopped at a photograph that made my breath catch. Henry at his desk, the attorney beside him, and my mother's figure, lurking in the corner. June 2004. I sent a scan to Caleb that night. His reply was immediate. It's admissible. They can't suppress this. Just 3 days later, I came home to find my apartment door ajar. Chaos. Drawers overturned, furniture slashed, my laptop smashed to pieces, papers strewn across the floor like snow. And there, amidst the wreckage, was a single note, in my grandfather's blocky handwriting. Legacy isn't inherited, it's earned. But it wasn't his message. It was theirs. A warning. A terrifying glimpse into how far they'd go. I gathered the scattered papers. My hands, surprisingly, no longer trembled. Each piece of evidence, each veiled threat, each brazen lie, it all formed a clear, undeniable picture. The puzzle was finally taking shape. They'd stolen my inheritance. They'd stolen my place. They'd tried to steal my voice. But they made one critical mistake. They left me alive to fight back. A week later, my phone buzzed. Ethan. His name flashing on the screen. I let it ring twice. We need to talk about what you've been doing, he snapped, his voice tight with a mix of anger and fear. I leaned back in my chair, watching the Portland skyline. I'm not doing anything, Ethan, I said, calm. I'm pursuing the truth. His voice cracked a little. Do you have any idea what this is doing to Mom? To Dad? People are talking, Beatrice. Oh, I knew people were talking. I'd seen the sideways glances at the grocery store, the sudden cancellations from old family friends. My mother, Diane Langford, was a master. Her whisper campaign was at full throttle, subtle insinuations about my mental state, carefully crafted rumors questioning my motives. In Portland society, her soft-spoken concern carried more weight than any shouted accusation ever could. The Rotary Club disinvited Mom from speaking next month, Ethan pressed on. 30 years of charity work, and suddenly they're going in another direction. I swallowed the bitter satisfaction that rose in my throat. That sounds difficult for her. Dad's having people look into your finances. He thinks you're desperate for money, I'm not desperate for anything, I cut him off, sharp. Except the truth. And I have nothing to hide. What I didn't tell him was that Graham's business connections were already at work. My mortgage lender had called yesterday, concerned about my application from 3 years ago. The art gallery where I occasionally sold my photographs? Suddenly reviewing their consignment agreement. Small, coordinated pressure points, all designed to paint me as unstable and greedy. Just stop this before it gets worse, Ethan pleaded, that familiar condescension creeping back. For everyone's sake. After hanging up, I saw a message from Caleb. Someone had followed him home from the grocery store. A friendly reminder to reconsider his testimony. The threat wasn't explicit. It didn't need to be. I wrapped my arms around myself, fighting that familiar instinct to retreat, to make peace at any cost. That's what they were counting on, the old Beatrice, who smoothed things over, who saved the company with her $500,000, then quietly vanished when dismissed. But that Beatrice was gone. The next morning, I met with Sandra Miller, bringing every single document I'd gathered. Her federal prosecutor's office felt like a fortress compared to my vulnerable apartment. This isn't just probate fraud, Sandra said, peering at Henry's original will through her reading glasses. If your father threatened your grandfather's lawyer, and that lawyer then disappeared, we're looking at potential federal crimes. I pushed a manila folder across her desk. I've cataloged everything chronologically, the will, witness statements, financial records from 2004 forward. Sandra raised an eyebrow, flipping through my meticulous timeline. You've been busy. I worked with numbers for years, I replied. Patterns matter. I spread out a second set of documents. This is what I found in the company records. Look at the transactions after Henry died. Her finger traced a column of figures. Multiple shell companies. Property transfers. All neatly structured to avoid detection. They didn't just forge grandfather's will, I explained. They systematically erased any financial connection between him and me. I tapped the bottom figure. And they've been doing similar things with other properties for years. Sandra took off her glasses, fixing me with a steady gaze. You understand what you're doing, Beatrice? This isn't just about inheritance anymore. You're mapping a conspiracy. Then came the text from Ethan. Meet us at the lodge. We just want to talk. The Langford Lodge at Crystal Lake, deep in Deschutes County, a private retreat from their old resort portfolio. I drove that winding forest road alone, my headlights cutting through the early evening darkness. My recording app? Ready on my phone, tucked in my jacket pocket. From the parking lot, I watched the lake shimmer under candlelight through tall windows. It looked like a cozy family reunion, not the ambush I knew it was. Inside, they were arranged like a portrait. Diane, of course, with her pearls at one end of the table. Graham, looking tired but defiant, at the other. Ethan, standing, pouring wine, his smile far too practiced. Beatrice, my mother said, rising halfway before settling back down. Thank you for coming. Graham cleared his throat. We thought it was time to clear the air. Direct conversation is always best, I replied, taking the seat across from Ethan, keeping my hands close to my phone. Diane sipped her wine. This situation has gotten out of hand. We're worried about you. Your health. Graham clarified, the stress of these delusions. I spotted a folder next to his elbow. What's that? Ethan slid it across the table. A solution. Simple. Clean. Final. Inside was a single document, a waiver of all claims against the Langford estate. One signature, and it would all be over. Sign this, Beatrice, Graham said, his voice softer now. And it's all over. We'll even establish a trust for you. Not what you imagine you deserve, but enough. I pretended to consider it. What exactly am I waiving here? Ethan didn't mince words. Everything. All claims. All rights to challenge the will. All this nonsense about forgery. He then turned to Graham, almost proudly. She doesn't need to carry Dad's mess anymore, right, Dad? You already handled that lawyer, right? The silence that followed was deafening. My father didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. My mother's fingers tightened, almost imperceptibly, around her wine glass. I stood up slowly, leaving the document unsigned. I'm done pretending. Beatrice, Diane's voice followed me to the door. Family loyalty still means something. I turned back one last time. Yes, I said, my voice firm. It does. That's exactly why I'm doing this. Driving away, I saw headlights among the trees, quickly extinguished. Someone was watching. I checked my phone. The recording had saved. Ethan's damning admission was now preserved, safe for Sandra. Over the next 2 weeks, my small support network grew, stronger than I ever imagined. Althea Monroe, fragile but sharp, signed a sworn affidavit. Caleb, despite his fear, rejected a huge bribe from Graham's attorney and recorded the offer. We're reopening this case with federal resources, Sandra told me, her eyes gleaming. What you've built here, Beatrice, is extraordinary. Together, we filed a formal complaint with the Oregon Bar Association and a petition to reopen probate, based on all the new evidence. A small piece in the local business journal questioned Langford Holdings' financial practices. I heard Diane's charity board was holding an emergency meeting about their association with her. Graham suffered his first health episode the day after receiving legal notifications. Then, my phone rang at midnight. It was Ethan, his voice raw. What do you want? He demanded. Just tell us. Name your price. I thought about the $520,000 I'd given them. The years of manipulation. Henry's will, stolen from me. I want what grandfather intended, I said, and hung up. The next morning, I made a decision I'd avoided for years. I drove to Mount Calvary Cemetery, white roses clutched in my hand. Henry's headstone was simple gray granite, his name etched in a classic font. I placed the roses, just as I had when I was a child, arranging them against the cold stone. From my purse, I pulled out his letter, the paper thin from years of folding and unfolding. I read it aloud, my voice steady in the quiet morning air. If she stands before you, she has already carried more weight than any man in this family. For the first time since this nightmare began, tears came. Not tears of pain or anger, but something cleansing. Healing. The crushing weight of doubt lifted. I finally embraced the strength he always saw in me. I won't let them erase you, I whispered to his headstone. Or me. In the days that followed, Sandra methodically built our federal case. Evidence chronologically organized, witness statements notarized, Althea's deposition recorded before her health deteriorated further. Our court date was set for 3 weeks away. I bought a new suit. Practiced my testimony in the mirror. I built my resolve, stone by stubborn stone. All the pieces were falling into place. It was the quiet before the storm. The night before our court date, a manila envelope slid under my apartment door. No sender. No markings. Inside? A single photograph of Henry's study at the family mansion. Something was circled in red marker, the painting behind his desk, a sunset over Mount Hood. I studied it closer. And there it was. The slightest misalignment. A hint of something behind it. A safe. A hidden safe I never knew existed. If there was evidence still in there, it could be the final, crucial piece. But getting it? It meant breaking into the family mansion. Impossible. Dangerous. Illegal. I stared at the photo for a long moment, then picked up my phone. Sandra, I said when she answered. There's something else. The warrant for the Langford mansion arrived at dawn, a testament to Sandra Miller's sheer efficiency. I stood on the sidewalk, watching federal marshals gather, their navy jackets stark against the pale morning sky. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sandra approached, a manila folder tucked under her arm. Ready? She asked, that same question from weeks ago. This time, my hands didn't tremble. More than ever. The family estate loomed, its limestone facade no longer intimidating, just cold stone and mortar. The marshals fanned out. Sandra rang the bell. Long, agonizing seconds passed. Then the door swung open. My father, Graham, stood there, bathrobe hastily belted, sleep still clouding his eyes. The sheer shock that transformed his face when he spotted me? That was worth every sleepless night of the past 3 months. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. The great orator, utterly speechless. Federal warrant to search the premises, Sandra announced, extending the document. Step aside, Mr. Langford. Behind him, my mother appeared on the stairs, silk robe perfectly arranged, even at this early hour. Only the slightest twitch at the corner of her eye betrayed her shock. Diane Langford had spent a lifetime perfecting her composure, but even perfection cracks under enough pressure. "Beatrice," she said, her voice smooth as polished stone. "What exactly do you hope to accomplish with this theater?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "The truth, Mother. Nothing more." The marshals moved through the house with practiced efficiency. I led them straight to Grandfather Henry's study, my footsteps sure, despite the years since I'd walked those halls. The familiar scent of leather-bound books and cedarwood hung in the air, unchanged by time or by betrayal. There, I pointed to the hunting scene behind his desk. Behind the painting, a marshal carefully removed the heavy frame, revealing the wall safe I'd learned about only 3 days prior. My father's face strained of color as he realized what was happening. "You need a combination," he said, his voice strained, a pathetic attempt at false confidence. I stepped forward, fingers hovering over the dial. May 14th, 1990. My birth date. The only date Grandfather would ever use for something this important. That safe, holding his secrets, was always meant for me to find. The lock clicked open. First try. Their family attorney arrived 20 minutes later, breathless and disheveled, but his arguments just bounced harmlessly off Sandra's calm, precise recitation of the warrant's parameters. My father, in the dining room, clutched his chest, suddenly claiming heart palpitations to delay his testimony. My mother retreated to her study, phone pressed to her ear, frantically calling in favors from board members, politicians, anyone with leverage. "Your brother's on the move," Caleb reported when he called. "Tried to visit Althea at the nursing home an hour ago." My stomach tightened. Did they let him in? No. Staff was warned. They turned him away. Caleb paused, his voice dropping. "They're getting desperate, Beatrice. Watch yourself." And then the safe. It yielded treasures beyond my wildest expectations. Grandfather's handwritten journal, chronicling conversations about the inheritance, his careful script detailing suspicions about my father's intentions. Letters between Henry and his lawyer, expressing growing concerns about interference in his estate planning. Photos of family gatherings, dated, contradicting the official timeline my parents had presented to the court. But the real prize? A small USB drive, tucked away in the very back corner. Sandra's tech specialist confirmed it. It contained company financial records from 2004, but also before that, the year the lawyer disappeared. The records that were lost in a server crash. "There's an audio file," the specialist said, connecting the drive to his laptop. The room fell silent. And then, my grandfather's voice filled the air. Steady. Clear. Despite his age, this recording serves as verbal confirmation of my wishes. "In the event of my death, all assets and holdings of Langford Estates shall pass to my granddaughter, Beatrice N. Langford. She alone has demonstrated the integrity and vision to carry forward what I've built." Something broke loose inside my chest. Vindication. After years of crushing doubt. The next morning, the local paper hit the stands, a front-page hit piece. Sources close to the family portrayed me as unstable, vindictive. It claimed I'd abandoned the family business, conveniently omitting my $500,000 contribution that actually saved it. "They're running the playbook," Sandra observed, scanning the article. Character assassination. Social isolation. Institutional pressure. Suddenly, society friends who once embraced me crossed the street to avoid eye contact. Emails circulated, subtly questioning Caleb's credibility. Political connections reached out to Sandra's superiors, whispering that the case lacked merit. But the tide was already turning. 3 former Langford Holdings employees stepped forward, offering sworn statements about my role in saving the company. Our accounting firm confirmed my $520,000 loan, producing documentation my parents had claimed was lost. Sandra, ever the strategist, arranged a press conference with the Department of Justice, transforming what started as a private inheritance dispute into a matter of public record. Caleb's meticulous documentation? It revealed a pattern of legal manipulation stretching back years. At the nursing home, Althea's health was fading, but her mind remained razor-sharp. Her nurse helped us record video testimony, preserving her account of Henry's while signing for the court. She was always there, Althea recounted, her papery hands smoothing an imaginary tablecloth, standing right behind him, watching every move, making sure he did what they wanted. Then, the dominoes truly started to fall. 2 board members resigned from Langford Holdings, citing personal reasons. A bank audit flagged questionable transactions in Ethan's accounts. Diane's charity organization launched an internal review, questions arising about financial discrepancies. Judge McKinney flat-out denied my parents' motion to delay proceedings, citing compelling evidence of potential elder abuse. Their carefully constructed reputation? It unraveled, thread by agonizing thread. I even spotted my mother and father in the courthouse parking lot, heads bent, voices raised in a way they'd never allow in public. My father jabbed a finger in my mother's face, his words carrying across the asphalt. "You said no one would check the signatures." Later that week, Ethan made a scene at a downtown Portland club, drinking heavily, shouting obscenities at anyone who even mentioned the family name. Their family attorney tried to meet with Sandra privately, sliding a settlement offer across the table, one that acknowledged some of my claims, but crucially, protected my parents from criminal charges. "We just want to resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding," he'd said, his voice oily with false sincerity. Sandra simply slid the paper back. Unopened. We're well past that point now. My apartment transformed into a fortress, new locks, a security system, cameras at every entrance. The court date was moved up due to Althea's declining health, accelerating our timeline. "They're desperate," Sandra warned during our final review. "Be careful." I nodded, surprised by the calm certainty I felt. Grandfather always said, "Truth has patience." The night before court, my phone rang at midnight. Caleb's voice crackled with barely contained excitement. "I found something in the archive. The missing lawyer's final case notes." He recorded Graham threatening Henry directly. "This connects intent to action, Beatrice." My breath caught. The implications crystallized. "Send it now." The document arrived by secure courier an hour later. My hands shook as I read the lawyer's detailed account of my father threatening my grandfather over the will. It was the final piece. It transformed our case from an inheritance dispute into a full-blown criminal conspiracy. They didn't just steal from me. I whispered into the empty room, shock rippling through me. They threatened him. Federal charges now loomed, inevitable, regardless of the probate outcome. As dawn broke on court day, I stood before the mirror, straightening my blazer with steady hands. The woman staring back bore little resemblance to the one who'd trembled in this courthouse months ago. Her eyes held no doubt. Her shoulders carried no burden of shame. Today, truth would finally take the stand. The courtroom hummed, a pressure cooker of anticipation, filled with whispers and camera. Clicks. I walked through the heavy oak doors, measured steps, so different from the agonizing uncertainty that plagued me when this all began. My navy blazer, chosen with purpose that morning, felt like armor. On the opposite side, my family presented their united front. Graham, looking every one of his 68 years, sat with fingers laced together, too tightly. Diane's pearls gleamed as she whispered to Ethan. Their attorney, Richards, a shark in an expensive suit, leaned across the aisle as I passed. "You're about to be destroyed, Miss Langford," he murmured, just loud enough. I met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm not here to destroy anyone," I told him, the words surprising even me with their clarity. "I'm here for the truth." This wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about setting right what was wrongfully taken. Sandra Miller sat beside me, arranging evidence folders with methodical precision. Her quiet confidence was a rock. Judge McKinney entered, and the court rose in unison. The first day unfolded exactly according to their script. Witness after witness paraded to the stand, each one painting me as unstable, incompetent, ungrateful. Former board members whose names I barely recognized described erratic decision-making. Family friends testified to my concerning behavior with rehearsed concern. Ethan took the stand in the afternoon, his performance almost impressive. Tears even glistened in his eyes as he described trying to protect the family legacy from my reckless management. My brother, who had never attended a budget meeting, who couldn't name 3 properties in our portfolio, suddenly portrayed himself as the company's savior. My mother followed, a masterclass in practiced maternal concern. We only wanted what was best for Beatrice, she said, touching her throat with manicured fingers. She was never suited for leadership, despite our hopes. Graham testified last, his voice gravelly, explaining how every decision was necessary for company survival. The courtroom absorbed his words like gospel. Portland's real estate legend, defending his empire against an ungrateful daughter. Richard smirked throughout, his confidence radiating across the aisle. By evening adjournment, whispers followed me through the courthouse corridors. Poor, deluded Beatrice, fighting her own family for nothing. I slept exactly 4 hours that night. But that morning, I felt a new kind of energy. The next morning, Sandra rose from our table. The prosecution calls Sandra Miller to the stand. Not as an attorney, but as a witness. An unusual move that sent a ripple of confusion through the gallery. Ms. Miller, please present your findings regarding Langford Holdings LLC, Judge McKinney instructed. Sandra activated a projector, displaying a meticulous timeline. What you're seeing, she stated calmly, is the documented history of Langford Holdings from 2004 through 2019. She pressed a button. A recording filled the courtroom. Ethan's voice, slightly muffled, but unmistakable. Dad already handled that lawyer. Then Graham's deeper tone, we just want to protect the family name. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Like the air before a storm breaks. Richards jumped up to object, but Sandra was already moving to her next exhibit. Your Honor, I present the video deposition of Althea Monroe, taken 2 weeks ago. Althea appeared on screen, her 82-year-old hands trembling slightly as she recounted witnessing Henry Langford sign his original will in 2004. Miss Diane was standing behind him the whole time, she said, her voice thin but clear, watching every move like a hawk. Photographs appeared next, time-stamped images confirming Althea's testimony. Then, financial records showing my $520,000 loan and the board meeting minutes from my dismissal 3 months later. Judge McKinney leaned forward, visibly intrigued. For the record, he stated, this court acknowledges prior acquaintance with the decedent, Henry Langford. He looked around. I see no conflict of interest. Neither side dared to object. His questions grew sharper, more pointed, revealing a deeper understanding of my grandfather's intentions than I'd ever anticipated. When Sandra called her surprise witness, Jessica Barnes, the former assistant to my grandfather's missing lawyer, the family's carefully constructed facade truly began to crumble. Jessica described documents being destroyed under pressure and hushed threats. Caleb followed, presenting the recovered case notes. Our technical expert demonstrated the forged signatures with overlay projections that left absolutely no room for interpretation. Banking records revealed suspicious transfers occurring just days after Henry's death. Each piece of evidence built upon the last, with devastating precision. Richard's objections grew more desperate with each passing hour. By afternoon, even he seemed to recognize the inevitable. Your Honor, Sandra said, her voice resonant, we present our final exhibit, a handwritten letter from Henry Langford to his granddaughter. She read the words I'd carried in my heart. If she stands before you, she has already carried more weight than any man in this family. My mother's composure finally shattered. Her fingers gripped her pearls so tightly I feared they'd snap. Graham clutched the table edge, his complexion ashen as his health visibly faltered. Ethan stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Not even mine. The judge reviewed the evidence one final time, his expression deeply contemplative. This case isn't complicated, he said finally, his voice cutting through the tension. It's criminal. His verdict came swiftly, all holdings of Langford Estates restored to me. Defendants charged with forgery and obstruction of justice. Criminal charges referred to the district attorney's office for further prosecution. As the court adjourned, I caught my mother's shocked whisper to Graham, "You promised this would never happen." Outside the courtroom, Ethan blocked my path, desperation etched across his face. "You've ruined everything," he accused. But the accusation held no power anymore. "No, Ethan," I told him quietly, looking him straight in the eye. "You did that yourselves." The judge's final statement addressed the elder abuse element specifically, recognizing my clear intentions and my relentless efforts to uncover the truth. The gavel struck with finality, its echo reverberating through the now silent room. I exhaled slowly, a profound weight of years lifting from my shoulders. There was no triumph in watching my family's disgrace, only a deep, abiding relief that truth had finally prevailed. Sandra placed her hand on my shoulder. Henry would be proud. For the very first time since this started, I believed that might actually be true. The national news vans finally disappeared from the courthouse steps. 3 months after the verdict, my name still pops up in legal journals, and it's whispered at Portland galas I no longer attend. Graham surrendered his real estate license. Then, just 2 days later, a massive stroke left the right side of his body paralyzed. Diane? She vanished from charity boards without a trace, retreating behind the walls of a much smaller house in Lake Oswego. And Ethan, my golden boy brother? He's no longer golden. Now he hammers nails into foundation frames in Bend, building modest homes in the very town where Langford Holdings once built only sprawling luxury properties. The irony isn't lost on me. I drove the familiar winding road to Crystal Lake as evening settled over the water. The same road I'd traveled months ago with dread coiling in my stomach now felt different, almost peaceful. The lodge stood unchanged, weathered timbers reflecting gold in the setting sun. I parked where I did that night, but this time, no headlights waited in the trees. No trap waited inside. The lake water shimmered, calm and clear, carrying none of the tension that had choked the air during my last visit. I walked to the edge of the dock, grandfather's note folded in my pocket. The paper had grown soft from my handling it over the years, those blocky letters fading, but still legible. Legacy isn't inherited, it's earned. I pulled out Henry's silver lighter, the one possession of his I'd kept all these years, and flicked it open. The flame caught the corner of the note, an orange glow spreading across his handwriting. Ashes drifted from my fingers, scattering across the water's surface, disappearing into ripples. They laughed when I walked in, I whispered to the darkening water, but they weren't laughing when I walked out. Last week, I met with 3 whistleblowers from Pacific Northwest Financial. The week before, for retirees who lost everything in an investment scheme. Yesterday, a single mother battling a predatory lender. Their stories were all different, but the pattern remained chillingly the same: power, silencing, truth, money, crushing justice. In their faces, I saw reflections of my own journey. Justice means nothing if it stops at the courthouse door. The Langford settlement money sits mostly untouched in my account. For $0.6 million. It almost feels vulgar after living comfortably in my loft for so long. But now, I have a purpose for it. The Langford Foundation for Legal Integrity opened its doors last month. We offer free legal aid to those silenced by power. The irony of using the Langford name isn't lost on me. But perhaps that's the point. Names like legacies can be redefined. 1 year later, I stood before 28 law students at the University of Oregon. Chalk dust clung to my fingers as I wrote 2 sentences on the board: integrity builds legacy. Legacy isn't given, it's built. Their eyes followed my movements, some skeptical, others curious. They'd read about my case, of course. It appears in their textbooks now, nestled between chapters on probate fraud and elder abuse. But they were here for more than legal precedent. They were drawn to the human element, the courage to stand alone against family pressure. Diane still writes occasionally, her elegant stationery carrying careful, measured words of reconciliation. Graham's recovery left him dependent on round-the-clock nurses. Ethan's calloused hands and sunburned neck tell of a slow, humbling through honest work. I read their letters with compassion, yes, but without surrender. Forgiveness doesn't require reunion. Peace, I've learned, exists in boundaries, not bitterness. I paused before erasing the board, catching the sound of laughter drifting through the open window. For years, laughter had been a weapon, my mother's cutting sound, designed to diminish. Today, the students' laughter felt life-affirming, natural, healing. Through the window, I watched students cross the campus green, spring sunshine streaming through budding trees. My reflection superimposed over them. A bridge between generations. Between what was and what could be. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't ache. It healed. Legacy is an inheritance. Its impact. The circle was complete. From silenced daughter to empowered teacher. I caught myself smiling. Not the practiced Langford smile of my youth, but something genuine. Something real. Something Henry would recognize.